Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. Latinos are a people who identify with each other based upon a common ancestral, social, cultural, or national experience. According to the Smithsonian Institution, the term Latino includes peoples of Portuguese roots, as well as Brazil, as well as those of Spanish language origin. In the year 2012, Hispanics constituted 17% of the United States population, or 53 million people. The United States is home to the largest community of Spanish speakers outside of Mexico, having surpassed Argentina, Colombia, and Spain within the last decade. These facts make some European Americans nervous. Some are concerned for their jobs, others for the continuity of American culture. To discuss this ethnic transition is Jorge Riopedre. Mr. Riopedre is the executive director of Casa de Salud, a clinic providing low-cost primary health care to the uninsured, focusing on the new immigrant community. He is also a 2015 USA Eisenhower Fellow. Jorge Riopedre, welcome to Conversation.
Thanks, Lee.
So let's talk about your primary job, which is Casa de Salud. First of all, I looked that up, and it's Health House?
House of Health.
House of Health.
That's right. Casa de Salud is House of Health. We are located on, we're a separate agency, but we're located on SLU's medical campus. They are kind enough to house us. And from that location, we provide primary health care to about 500 people per month at the clinic. We also assist somewhere in between 100 to 150 people per month to get help outside of our clinic when what their situation entails is something more than the need for basic health care. In that case, our team helps connect them to larger clinics and hospitals and to get them affordable care in those locations. We've been doing this for 5 years now, and it's been a wonderful experience to try and give the ability to have health care to people who are uninsured and poor and who many times as immigrants face other obstacles such as language and transportation to be able to get care that they need.
How do you sift through to decide the 500 that are coming to visit you?
How do I sift through them?
Yes.
So basically, word of mouth gets people to our clinic. After that, the sifting is simply doing an intake process so that the nurse and her medical personnel determine what's going on with the patient. After that, they are seen by one of our 56 volunteer physicians and providers. And through that, then we determine exactly what their best course of care is and what we can do. We don't do much advertising or in any way really trying to put out any word because it's kind of been word of mouth for people to know that we are there and to be able to come to us for care.
And do people have to fill out a financial disclosure? You say you
Right.
Low income. I mean, so.
Right. So no, not at all. We in fact ask the fewest possible questions at all. We try and make as few barriers as possible for people to come into care. The only questions or information that we gather in the process of giving them care at CASA is information directly related to what their physical illness or situation is. We don't really get any real problems with people coming to us who aren't low income.
Like the rich?
No, because as nice as
you.
Casa de Salud is, if you have money, if you have insurance, you have a whole lot of options available to you. So that pretty much self-sifts people in terms of who's going to come to us and who's not.
Mm-hmm. And so of these 500 a month that are coming to, is this mostly like they're coming to a doctor's office and
Right.
They're just getting what you normally get in the doctor's office, the primary health care check?
That's exactly correct. So what you would come to CASA for is what you or I would have taken care of in a doctor's exam room. That when we go to connect people with other sources of care, it's when the doctor determines that whatever is going on with the patient exceeds what can be done in that exam room. But in terms of on-site at CASA, That's what people are coming for. That and mental health care. We have 3 psychiatrists and a psychologist who offer therapy for people who are suffering from mental health issues.
So if mom has kids that have measles or have the flu, that's something within the purview?
No, we don't do pediatrics. For kids, many kids do have some form of insurance attached to them, whether it be a state insurance program or whatnot. And so in an effort to maintain our resources just for those who do not have insurance and have other options for care, we don't do pediatrics. However, if a mom calls us and her child has measles, we will connect her and the child with another source of care.
Mm-hmm. And now, is this if people are on Medicaid, are they? We would not accept that. We would ask them not to come to us if they had Medicaid or Medicare. You're just looking for basically people that have no other options at medicine other than coming to see you. Then.
That's correct. It's difficult to garner enough resources to serve as many people as we are serving. And so in order to preserve those resources, we do try and focus on those who truly have little to no other option for their health care.
Now, some might ask, I thought that that's what Obamacare was supposed to do, was to make sure that everybody in the United States, if you're in the United States, you have health care coverage so that you can go see a doctor. So please straighten us out here as to how it is that you have people coming to you that don't.
Well, you have 2 main issues there. One is that one of the legs of the stool that was cut out from Obamacare by the Supreme Court was when they ruled it was constitutional, but said that the states did not have to expand Medicaid. And so when the state of Missouri did not expand Medicaid, that left out, depending on who you ask, between 200 and 250,000 people who would have been covered by the Affordable Care Act, but are not because this state chose not to expand Medicaid. So you have that population. The Affordable Care Act also left out those who have been in the country legally, but for less than 5 years, and who are here in the country not legally. So again, depending on who you ask, you're talking between 10 and 16 million people. So you put all those numbers together, and there's still plenty of people who the Affordable Care Act leaves out, not to mention those who work for companies who have less than 25 employees and therefore are exempt from the law.
Mm-hmm. So, I hate to ask, but I guess I need to. Are most of the people who come to see you, therefore, not legally in the United States?
So I could not begin to tell you, because we do not ask any questions whatsoever about legal status. It's not our place to be worried about status. Our place is to seek and give care to people who need it.
Good, good. And are you also in the contraceptive business as well? I mean, like females come to you looking for contraceptive services?
We have gynecologists who see our patients. What that gynecologist advises the patient or treats the patient obviously is not my concern. With HIPAA, I would not be privy at all to what that patient is coming for. In terms of us, like literally handing out contraception, that's not what we do. We provide the patient with an opportunity to see a woman's health profession.
Okay. You mentioned the word HIPAA, or a lot of people hear that. A lot of people are asking, sign this HIPAA statement.
Sure.
You're an executive director, so I'll bet you know something about HIPAA. Can you explain to people what it is that they're signing?
In a nutshell, because we don't have half an hour, in a nutshell, it is saying that, first of all, that I, as my healthcare facility, will not disclose your protected health information to anyone, with the usual caveats being that if you're going to go see a specialist, we will be able to transfer that information to him or her, but I cannot discuss that. The doctor cannot discuss your health information with me. I cannot discuss it in fact, I'm not allowed to know anything about it. Even when data comes across my desk for reporting purposes, it's completely de-identified. It's a patient number, not a patient name. It also limits and gives the patient power over who in their family can have that information shared. You could even say, I do not want my spouse to have access to that information, and then I would not be able to give it to you. So HIPAA, in the end, is trying to give the patient ownership and control over his or her health information so that without his or her permission, it cannot be disclosed to anyone.
Now, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but what led the Congress to pass HIPAA? You familiar with that?
I will give you only what my basic knowledge is that there was, in the opinion of Congress people who had heard from their constituents, there was too much free-flowing discussion between doctors and other personnel, between administrators, with information or going back and forth, or me calling and saying, hey, I'm Mrs. Smith's husband. I would like you to tell me what happened. And maybe Mrs. Smith didn't want Mr. Smith to know what happened, but the doctor said, sure, here's what happened. To address those types of concerns, HIPAA was put into place. It is broader than that. I'm only giving you only what I can tell you for sure.
That's pretty much my understanding, except for the part where at the bottom, much of what HIPAA says at the top, at the bottom, except for the insurance companies, except for the law courts, except for, there are a number of exceptions.
Like any law, it is imperfect. It has simply tried to take a step forward to correcting a situation that was occurring where patients' information was being traded too lackadaisically. And I can tell you in our own clinic that I believe in the law because it's helped us to really focus on making sure, like if we're in the lobby, that we do not talk at all about a patient who came here or any kind of information, and that's how it should be. And I think without the law, maybe there wouldn't be that focus.
I know that doctors are now, especially at hospitals, are really told in the elevators, do not stand there and talk to your colleagues about a particular patient.
Exactly. In fact, the hospitals I've been in, there are signs in the halls, in the elevators, typically with somebody like this in the photo saying, do not discuss your patients here. And that's, again, is an effect of the law.
So you got to go in the back into the room. And
you go into a private space and you're only discussing it with that person who the information must be discussed with and who you have permission from the patient to discuss it with.
Okay. Is there anything else about Casa de Salud that you wanted to mention before we move on?
Only to say that I think Casa de Salud serves a very important function in the safety net, healthcare safety net of the St. Louis region. We are creating an opportunity to have care given to people who otherwise would probably not get care. That's obviously a good thing, in my opinion, from a humanistic point of view. It's also a good thing from the protection of the public health, because you do not want people who are sick, especially with communicable diseases, to be untreated. And it's good in terms of cost reduction, because by us bringing in people into care while a disease or illness is at a lower stage, it prevents that situation from becoming exacerbated and then having to seek uncompensated care at an emergency room or in a hospital later on that costs all of us, ultimately, a lot more money. So CASA, I think, is providing a very valuable service that, while it's aimed at immigrants, I think ultimately has some positive effect for everyone living in the region.
Okay. Now, you heard me in the introduction say something about Latinos and concerns among the European American people who are already in the United States as to a job or a change of culture. Mm-hmm. You and I had this conversation over the phone, but I wanted you to address that issue right here, right now.
Sure. I think I don't dismiss the way people are feeling, right? Anytime there are cultural and demographic changes in a country, you're going to have a feeling of displacement, of those kinds of feelings that are quite natural and understandable. Having said that, we should look at what history has told us, and we should look at what the data is telling us. And history has told us that one of the things that this country, the United States, has always been marvelous at is the assimilation of immigrant groups. And so when people say now that this Hispanic immigrant group now, whether it be Mexican or Guatemalan or any of the other Hispanic countries, that they're going to change the United States, that they're going to change the culture. History shows us quite clearly that that has never been the case before. Whether it's been the Irish or the Poles or the Italians or the Germans, it has always been that immigrant group comes, and rather than changing the United States changes them. And they take up the general values of the country, and they make the country stronger and more vibrant by their presence. The same, I have every reason to believe, will be true with the Hispanic population. Not only because of history, because we see the data now. The data is telling us that so you have the immigrant generation come in. By the next generation, the children are at best bilingual, and frankly, I hope bilingual, or at worst, on my point of view, now monolingual English. By their 84%, according to the Pew Hispanic Center, 84% have a preference for non-Hispanic friends. By the second generation, you are almost certainly looking at monolingual children whose connection, if any, remains to the home country is minimal. This is to say that the data is showing us quite clearly that immigrants, Hispanic immigrants specifically here, are learning English, are adapting and acculturating to the values of the country, and in fact are becoming Americans. As I mentioned to you before, my father was part of not even this next generation or my daughter's generation. He was the immigrant generation. He came in without English. He came in without a job or without money. He learned English. He got a job. And now no one thinks of him as an immigrant. They think of him as an American. And I think my father is not an aberration. I think that is what is happening and will continue to happen with the Hispanic population here in the U.S.
I agree with what you've just said. The only thing that I wonder is, it's rare that we have such a large influx in a short period of time of people who are outside of the American culture coming into the American culture. And so there are some people who wonder, and they've expressed it to me, as to whether or not, as you said, that America enculturates those who come here. Is it possible that because there is such a large group that doesn't happen, that in fact the influence goes the other way? And the worst part is all the cultural things that people are running away from to come to the United States suddenly spreads into the American culture. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do, but so let me try and break that up. First of all, there's a reason why the Statue of Liberty says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses," because they're not trying to run away from the situation to then bring it to the United States. They're trying to run away with it to find the better life that the United States promises. So right there, you have a pretty strong motivation to adapt the values of the country you are coming into rather than what you are leaving. Secondly, I go back to the data again. The data is showing us that in fact that people are in fact being acculturated, that people are in fact learning English and adopting what we would just loosely call American values. So once again, the data is showing us that that the fears that you're talking about are not being realized. And insofar as the economy, there's again copious data showing us that where immigrants, Hispanic or otherwise, where immigrants come into a region, that region's economy is a better economy, is a stronger economy, is a more vibrant economy. Also, just to tack on one more thing, immigrants have a much lower level of incarceration and rate of crime. So even there, the data is showing us that when people say, "Oh, well, immigrants, what they're running away from, and they're going to bring in crime," the data is showing us the exact opposite. So I don't think that these fears hold water when you see what's actually happening.
This part I hate to get into, really, but what do you make of the Trump effect, in which and it is true that there are a number of very high-profile cases of illegal immigrant criminals who have been repeated criminals in the United States, and then their crimes have risen to the point where they become a national cause celeb?
Well, I mean, I think the first and most easy thing I would say about that is how many white repeat criminals are there? How many African American repeat criminals are? How many Indian repeat criminals are? Every single ethnic population is going to have people within it that are criminals and that are going to, as many criminals unfortunately do, have repeat offenses. I go back to the data. What is the data showing us from immigrants? Much lower crime rate, much lower incarceration rate. So I could cherry pick any piece of data. I could show you any person, say, "Oh, look at that Hispanic, he killed somebody." Yep, I could do that to any ethnic group. So let's go back to the data as a whole so that we have real information, and that information is showing us that it is in fact cherry picking and is not indicative of anything that would say that this population has more propensity to commit crime or to be repeat offenders. So, and as for Donald Trump himself, It's an unfortunate phenomenon. I think it's bringing out the worst of some of us in the United States, and is really turning our backs on our immigrant history and the incredible contributions that immigrants have and continue to make for this country. I think that that Mr. Trump is unfortunately trying to score political points at the expense of what is best for the United States. And that is, to my mind, a very disturbing thing.
There are some, and I know it's a very, very small group of Hispanics that have talked about reconquering and taking back under the control of Mexico, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Southern California. What's up with them?
So let's go back to our conversation from a minute ago. Every group is going to have its people who are out there. Every group is going to have a fringe element. Usually we're talking by the very definition of fringe, a very small number of people who say and think outlandish things. Because in a group of 1 million, 100 say stuff that's out there should not infect the other 995,000, right? Not only is no one who has any seriousness at all talking in any way about returning parts of the United States to the home country. We go back to what we just said a second ago. It's the opposite. They've come to America to make a better life for themselves. They have put down roots, and the United States is their country. Mm-hmm. So they would not choose, the vast majority would not choose to repatriate themselves, let alone try to capture territory for their country of origin. So at the end of the day, I would dismiss that as completely crank, to be completely frank with you.
Okay. Why do you think the press carries stuff like that?
Because the press is the press.
Okay.
The press is the press.
That's a good enough explanation. and if you who are listening to this don't understand that, then you missed something, because nowadays the press really does carry some really outrageous
statements. People talk about the press on the left, the press on the right. Press is the press. They want to sell. They want to attract you, and the way they attract you is with the most horrible, the most outlandish, the most out there stories, because that's what people watch.
Well, if it bleeds, it leads. Right.
That's right.
So now you were recently in Mexico.
Yes.
But you're not a Mexican, you're Cuban.
Cuban origin, yes.
Right. But when you went to Mexico, and I don't know what your business was there, but what is it that's going on in Mexico that you may have observed which is causing so many people from there to say, I've had enough, I'm going to the United States of America for a better life?
All right. I was there as I was fortunate enough to be awarded an Eisenhower Fellowship. And through that fellowship, I went first to Germany and then to Mexico to study those countries' healthcare systems. And in both cases, given what I do, to get a special emphasis on learning about how they care for their immigrant and refugee populations. What can I say in terms of Mexico, directly answering your question? There is tremendous corruption in the Mexican government, unfortunately. And that corruption, especially combined with oil prices that have plummeted, has created severe economic repercussions in Mexico. With that, when you have severe economic downturns, you have a loss of jobs. And so what does the United States have? The United States has money and jobs, and for the person who is willing and able to come to the United States under any circumstances, whether that's legal or illegal, there are ready opportunities for work here in jobs that, as we hear cliche now, but is true, that no one else wants to do. The picking of fruit, the 12-hour landscaping jobs, all that stuff that stereotypically...
Being up on the roof in the middle of the summer.
Correct. And so those jobs are still readily available here. And so that not only allows the Mexican or other immigrant person to be able to sustain him or herself, it allows them to be able to, if they still have family back in their country of origin, to send some money back so that family can actually maintain its life. So you put those factors together, plus the unfortunate continued violence of the narco traffickers, and Mexico finds itself in a very difficult situation, which then translates into no surprise to me that many of its people would want to seek better opportunities in the United States.
In the last 3 minutes that we have here, as an American, I'm speaking to you as an American citizen, do you think that it is a problem that we have so many people coming into the United States without proper papers, or is this like so much hype?
Is it a problem insofar as it's a problem in the context of it's better for Mexico, just using that country because it's not just Mexico, obviously, but using that country. It's better for Mexico and better for the U.S. if the economy in Mexico was stabilized so that people could find their own economic vitality in that country, and that would facilitate more equal trade between the two countries, and so it would create a better economic situation. So in that context, obviously, that would be problematic, that we would like to have a change. But insofar as we, the United States, have benefited tremendously from the immigrant population, and I'll speak right now about the especially undocumented immigrant population, that we as a society, we as Americans have abetted, because we might talk about how we can't stand illegal immigrants and about how they shouldn't be here, but we don't complain when our hotel rooms are cheaper because of them, when our groceries are cheaper because of them, when our landscaping is cheaper because of them. We don't complain about that. We like that. And so as long as that's the case, we are abetting and by default permitting, asking for that labor to come into our country. That we have reaped the benefits of that. And so if you look at it strictly through an economic lens, it has been a very good thing for the United States, for people who have come here seeking work opportunities and then, because of their legal status, take jobs that are low pay and high work that then benefit us. I then, like many others, have called for more equity, have called for true economic and comprehensive immigration reform, so that we could get back to making sure that the rule of law is obeyed, right? But also that those benefits would then be more equally shared, that wages would go up, that workers wouldn't be taken advantage of, and that we in the United States would still reap a benefit, but not on the backs of people who would have no other choice.
We're down to like 30 seconds here, so we're pretty much done. But I guess one quick question. The wall, good, bad, indifferent?
Ridiculous. You cannot secure a 2,200-mile border, especially when 40% of the people who are now here illegally come in a plane with a visa and overextend their visa. The wall is a joke.
So it's, it's
the wall is a joke.
It's a tough situation.
You cannot, that is not going to be the answer.
Well, okay. Thank you so much for your forthright answers today, and I certainly do appreciate your coming and spending this half hour with us.
My pleasure, Lee.
And I've been speaking with Jorge Riopedre. He is the executive director of the Casa de Salud, which is in St. Louis and associated with, would you say St. Louis University? St. Louis University. We're going to be uploading this program to YouTube so that you can show it to your friends. Just go to YouTube, type in Conversation with Lee Presser, and you'll find this. Next time, see ya. Thanks. Bye.